All right. Is it working? So I'm going to use a mic tonight, which feels a little, I have a very loud voice, but we're recording this tonight, and so I'm going to use the mic, so hopefully it won't be too overpowering. But my name is Anna, and I'm really excited to be here with you guys tonight. And I was really excited when Tim asked me to come speak, because what I'm going to teach tonight is something I teach in the business world. And for a long time, I've been burdened thinking, I want to teach this to families. So when I teach it in the business world, a lot of times people approach me and say, man, I would love for my teenagers to learn this. Or, man, I would love for me and my spouse to take this class and figure out how to use it in our family relationship. So for a long time, I've been burdened thinking, man, I would love to figure out how to get this into the family, but I also didn't know how, right? Like, how do you just walk up to random people and say, want to take a class? I don't know. So I've actually been praying lately, God, would you just show me how you want me to use my time? Would you show me how you want me to use my talents and these things I'm passionate about? And within 2 weeks, Tim called and said, hey, would you lead the family meeting? And I was like, what's a family meeting? So this is my first family meeting ever. And so he told me what this was and that you guys are parents of the students and alive, and that got me really excited. So I'm really excited to be with you tonight. And we're really going to talk a lot about how to ask quality questions and actually get deep with I keep wanting to call them students, but I guess they're your kids, right? So I used to be a high school teacher up in Baltimore, and I loved it. It was one of my passions, and now I teach more in the business corporate world. But what's really cool, I taught what I'm going to teach you tonight to the Alive leaders maybe 2 or 3 weeks ago. And have you ever just had one of those moments where you're like, this is what I was made to do? And like, this is all clicking for me all of a sudden. So I teach how to ask good questions in the business world. But I always have that longing, like, man, if we could use this in ministry, or if we were talking about heart change. And have you ever been in an environment where people are bringing their issues or challenges to you, but there's not that faith connection? And even when you bring it up or say, can I share my faith with you, they're not always open to it. I got really excited teaching this to the Alive leaders because I thought that's the whole point of why they're here. Like, they're here to affect life change and talk about Jesus. And so it all just kind of clicked for me and birthed a passion of, I want to keep teaching this in the ministry setting. So I'm excited to be with you and help you as you interact with your kids. Teens. Can we call them kids? Teens, kids. Before we do, though, I would like to pray. And if you're just coming in, there is a handout. Real quick, did everybody get this? Hopefully you did. If not, I can give one to you, or there's some over on that table. But why don't we open in prayer, and then we'll jump into questions, why they matter. And just so you know, I doubt we'll be here till 8:30. That's how long this usually goes, right? My plan is to teach it. I'd actually like us to practice it, to just cement what we're teaching. And then I'll stick around for questions. And if that's 45 minutes, if it's an hour, that's the plan. So I do not intend to be here till 8:30. All right. Well, why don't we pray? Dear Lord, I just thank you so much for this opportunity and for the parents willing to come here. It's rainy. It's Sunday night. Tomorrow is the kickoff of school and work. And they're here. And so I just thank you that they came here. I pray that you'll give me the right words to express what you want me to express tonight. And even though this isn't a Bible lesson and we're not necessarily opening scripture, I believe that you care a lot about the questions that we ask. And I pray that you'll help me to just know how to guide us through this well and to all leave better because of it. So I just pray that you'll be with us tonight and help the students as they are having their party, help them to have fun. In your name, amen. Okay, you guys ready? All right, so let's see, is this working? Hopefully, yes it is. Okay, so there's actually okay, hold on a second. We added in a slide, it won't go backwards. Can you make it go backwards? I think I'm too far from back there. So I studied really youth ministry in college. And I had this one professor, his name was Dr. Davies. And if any of you know Janet Brown, if you know Janet Brown, she's now Janet Bridges, it's her father-in-law, just a little side note. I got excited. I was at a wedding, and my favorite college professor walked in, Dr. Davies, in Greenville, South Carolina. And I'm like, what are you doing here? But anyway, He had this quote in one of my classes, and it has stuck with me for 20-some years. I'd actually love for you to write this down. He said, questions prick the conscience, but accusations quench the spirit. So I'll say it again. Questions prick the conscience. Accusations quench the spirit. So questions prick the conscience. Accusations quench the spirit. And I will tell you, I've seen that true so many times, and I'm sure that you have as well, where you might have an assumption of something that happened or what they intended or a scenario that occurred. And when you instead stop and ask a question versus, you did this, right? Or what's going on here? But when you can instead say, what was in your head when this thing happened, it gives them a chance to talk. And I have found, as a high school teacher, I often found that what I assumed was going on was not the case at all. And had I made my accusation or had I made the thing I was thinking and just said it, it would have crushed the spirit, right? So accusations quench the spirit, but questions prick the conscience. So I think questions really matter. And if we look at Scripture, we know that Jesus asks 307 questions. It's a lot of questions. He asked 307 questions. He is asked 183. However, he only answers 3. Isn't that fascinating? And I just want to let that sit there for a minute. Like Jesus, who was so wise and had so many wonderful things to share, and he did share, right? Yet he primarily was a question asker. And when he was asked questions, he frequently would turn it around and ask a question. So I never really noticed that till I started studying questions. Also, there's a coach in my world of life and business coaching, and he's in his 80s. His name is Tony DeCello. I love him. He is actually a believer, which is great in the secular world with me at work. And he's like everyone's grandpa, and everyone just says he's just the best coach around. He's just so great. He will change your life. And I had the opportunity one day to see him coach someone on stage. And they volunteered to be coached. And I paid attention, and I started writing down questions because I'm like, I need to learn from this guy. And I couldn't keep up. And in about 15 minutes, guess how many questions he asked? 83. He asked 83 questions. He only made one statement, and the statement was repeating what she said to make sure he heard her correctly. And when she got off stage, she said, that was the most transformative coaching conversation I've ever had. And what was interesting is because I'd been making note, I actually stood up and I said, I have a takeaway. He asked 80 plus questions, and no one else had really noticed because you didn't realize it. As you were listening, it sounded like he was delivering all this wisdom, and what he was actually doing was asking question after question after question. So that really convinced me, wow, questions really matter. Jesus does them, and Tony DeCello does them. So I, as a young coach, I want to get really good at those. And I have seen them really transform people as I've been able to work with them. Praise the Lord for that, right? So tonight, I want to teach you how to be excellent question askers. And my guess is you've probably been exposed to questions training before somewhere. Can you just kind of wave at me if you've had questions training before? It depends on your environment. It depends where you work, your background. But my goal tonight is to make it pretty elementary, but also take it deeper than you may have heard before. So basically, if you're new to this, or if you've had lots of training on questions, my goal is you leave here with a takeaway tonight that you can actually use. One thing I do love is when I teach this in the business world, it's usually a 2-day class, so you're getting a crash course. But frequently the second day I'll say, did anyone use this last night? Just out of curiosity. Anyone use this with your kids over dinner? And usually, most of the time, one person will get up, they'll get emotional and say, I had one of the most meaningful conversations with my kids last night. One lady said, I didn't even mean to. I didn't even mean for this to happen. And we ended up talking about the meaning of life. And she was just amazed. And it all came from asking really good questions. So we're gonna get into it tonight. So why do questions matter? Why do questions matter? So one, it helps build rapport. It helps build rapport. And this is all in your notes if you want to stick it in there. And if you can advance the slide. So it builds rapport, number one. Number two, it helps with self-discovery. It helps with self-discovery. So I'm willing to guess that many of you at some point have had someone in your life ask you questions, and Peter actually does this from stage often, where you're sitting there and because the question was asked, you realized something about yourself that you didn't realize, right? And so I think as adults working with younger people, whether your kids, someone else's kids, it can be easy because you know things, right? You have wisdom, or you can kind of see the bigger picture that they don't see because they're looking at the issue right here. And it can be really easy to want to just dispense wisdom, right? And there is a time for that. Yet what if we instead stopped and started asking questions to help them self-discover, right? Often that will help them have a deeper connection. The other reason for this is it helps with self-persuasion. So I don't think any of us need a class to tell us that teens don't like to be told what to do, right? Like, that's pretty universal. Adults don't usually like to be told what to do. But you know what works is if I tell myself what I should do, I'm usually a lot more bought in, right? So what we know is if you ask, what do you think you should do about that? Or what did you learn at Alive tonight? That's amazing. Ask some questions. Okay, what do you think would be a minor change you could make in your life because of that? Just a tweak. What could you do? That's going to be much more than you saying, it sounds like we should do this, right? Is everybody tracking with me? By the way, I'm a feedback person. If you know anything about strengths, anybody here know Strengths Finder? I'm a high woo. So I always joke around. Woo means that I'm basically I really pay attention to like facial expressions to know, are they tracking with me? So I always joke around, if the class is boring, it's totally your fault because you're not reacting. So I'm joking. But really, I invite participation. And if you have a question, I'm totally cool with that. But if you can have them say what they should do or what they learned, that's going to help them buy into actually following through with it versus go do this or whatever, okay? Also, from a science perspective, and I think this is really fascinating, it stimulates what's called the neocortex. And I love the brain. I love how science supports, it's all just amazing how God made us, right? So questions actually stimulate the social and emotional processing. So again, this is another reason instead of telling, the more that you can ask questions, and I actually have some questions to give you guys before the night's over, it's going to help them actually get stimulated in the part of their brain that helps them process emotions. Isn't that amazing? Like there's actually a part of our brain that you can stimulate just by asking a question. It also helps with sleep, memory, and learning processes. So that's why sometimes if you've had a good conversation with someone, you sleep a little better, right? It's actually science. Also, it helps with logical thinking and language, which we all know we really could help develop the kids with logical thinking. Their brain is still developing, so let's help it along. So it is really cool from a science perspective as well. So let's go ahead and talk about the types of questions. And what we're going to do is I'm going to teach the types of questions. Then I'm actually going to see if one of you would be willing to just volunteer, and you can tell me what topic to ask you. But I would like to demonstrate kind of mapping out a conversation up here on the board, and then I'm just going to have you guys practice. So I find the best way for you to learn this is just to do it, and I want to provide a space for that here, because I know what it's like when you're busy. You leave, and then, we got to stop at the grocery store, and then all these other things happen, and then we don't actually practice. So I'm going to give you guys a lot of opportunity to practice. So the type of questions, number one, we have open-ended questions. And would someone just say, I know it's up on the screen, but some of you have had training in questions. Just what's your definition for an open-ended question? And there's no right or wrong. Just how would you describe an open-ended question? Yeah, tell me about your day today. Yeah. It produces more words. How was your day? Good? Bad? Or sometimes you just get a grunt, right? Like, so how was your day? Tell me about your day. So open is more multiple words in the answer. And I like to use, this is kind of an Anna thing that I came up with, is open versus beginning. And I'm going to use an analogy for you. Say that we're outside right now, and I called a landscaper, and I said, you know what? I would love you to plant a cherry tree right here in this spot. And he says, okay, great. That'll take me about 8 scoops of dirt and That plus the tree, $100, we'll call it a day. Okay, great. Well, let's say that we look out about an hour later, and he has done 8 scoops of dirt, but there was 1 scoop here, and 1 scoop over there, and then another scoop over there, and 1 over there. And he actually did 8 scoops of dirt, but he was all over the yard, so he actually just created crazy chaos, right? And he didn't actually go deep. And when I was first learning open-ended questions, I was practicing. And I had one of those days where I was like, man, I really rocked that. Like, I was a really good question asker today. And I had recorded my practicing so I could listen and see, like, am I really doing as good as I think I am? Well, I really thought I did so good that day that I listened to the recording so that I could hear how good I was. Like, I was like, I know I nailed that. I really want to hear it. Well, when I listened to the recording of myself practicing these questions, my eyes were opened, because what happened is I was asking open-ended questions, but they were things like, tell me about your day. Oh, what does Sally's family do? Oh, okay, tell me what you loved about your lunch break today. And what I realized is I would ask like an opening question, or the first scoop of dirt, so to speak, on a whole bunch of different topics, and they were talking, we were having a conversation, but I wasn't actually going deep. Does that make sense? And so if you really want to plant a tree somewhere, you have to do 8 in one spot. You can't be jumping around. And so that's where we have open beginning and then open digging. So you'll see tonight, I've given you a bunch of questions. The open beginning is kind of like, here's some things you could use to start a conversation. You're in the car talking about nothing, so let's start the conversation. And then I'm going to teach you open digging, which is how do you actually go further in the conversation? Make sense? Really important. Digging, one key thing is use their words. And this should be in your notes at the bottom of the first page. Use their words to dig deeper. So if they say, I'm trying to think because I'm in real estate. So I was going to say, someone says I want to downsize my house. I'm not going to say you want a smaller house. I'm going to say downsize in the next question, because that's their word. So you know how if you're in person, one way that you can tell if you're in rapport with someone is if you're kind of standing the same way? Have you heard this? It's like if someone's standing like this, and then you realize you're standing that way, it's just a good sign you're in rapport, and you don't mean to do it. It just happens when you're in rapport. Well, with language, the way to do that is to use their words. So in counseling, coaching, that's a very common thing that they teach, is use the person's words, because it builds a lot of rapport. And it helps just get that relationship solidified. And it's, wow, they really heard me. They used my exact words. It's subconscious. They don't realize it. But it does help with a lot of rapport. Okay, if you go to the next page, closed is short one-word answers. Short one-word answers. And it's used to check for understanding, but also gain commitment. So I always joke around. I'm not married. And there's an analogy here. And I say this because I think it will help you remember. But if someone came up to me and said, hey, what do you think about spending your life with me? That's a great open-ended question, right? But I'm going to sit there thinking like, oh my gosh, is this it? Like, is this the moment? But if it's, will you marry me? Now I know exactly what's going on, right? Like, there is no question. This is a question to gain commitment. Will you marry me? So I like to use that analogy because people usually laugh like you did. And then you remember, closed questions should be used sparingly. And they're used either to gain understanding or gain commitment. So gaining commitment would be, it sounds like you should probably read your Bible, right? Yes. Or no. Hopefully yes. That's to gain commitment. Will you take the trash out tonight? Yes. So I'm gaining commitment. If you're using it to get understanding, it might be something like, so what I'm hearing you say is, this happened at school, right? Did I hear you right? That's gaining understanding. Make sense? Okay, cool. So let's actually look into it. And if you go on your sheet, I have some that you can use, and there's plenty. I just put down a couple that I was thinking of. I mean, it's endless, which you could use, as long as it's open-ended. But let's say that we want to get the conversation started. We're going to use an open beginning question. So what was the most significant part of Alive tonight? right? The blanks down there on the third one, it says, what is on your mind the most right now? I think it's a great question. What is on your mind the most right now? What keeps you up at night is another good one. Obviously, you guys will know because you're with them and they're your kids. But you want to just basically ask a very open-ended question to get the conversation started. Then what you're going to do, where it says open digging, the blanks are actually there on purpose. And the blank, you're going to fill in with whatever word they just said. So if they said, what's on my mind tonight? Oh, can you go back one? Yeah, there you go. If they said, I don't know, what is something that they might say? What's on your mind tonight or what's keeping you up? I don't have teenagers, so help me out. What are they talking about right now? A test. Okay. So describe for me what does the test mean to you? Right? How will this test change things for you? Which actually, it sounds kind of like a deep question about a test, right? But maybe you can have those high achievers. I've taught them where they're totally stressed out. And I would look and think they could get a C on this and still pass this class great. And they have stuff going on at home, and they need to be okay getting a B, right? So that actually could be a question you could ask. How will this test change things for you? How big of a deal is this test, right? And then put this in your margin. I didn't put it in the notes, but you want to ask 3 digging questions. There's a lot of psychology to this, but just to keep it brief, they've studied that if you ask an opener and then you ask 3 digging, that is usually the right amount to get to the real thing that's actually going on. And I will just share my experience with you as a life coach and a business coach, which is the last thing I ever thought I would do, by the way. I always said I would never work in business. And if you're not in full-time ministry, what are you doing with your life? And now I see that it is a huge ministry to be working out in the world, right? And so it's the last thing I ever thought I would do. And I get to talk to people all the time in the business world that don't know Jesus, and it's pretty awesome. And I have observed, and you'll see, because I'm going to map out how to know that you've asked enough questions. I have noticed the third question is where the magic happens. And to give you an example of this, at one point I was a college recruiter up in the Washington, D.C. area, and I was about 26. And if you want to feel intimidated, be a 26-year-old college recruiter, and you want to know who was on the other end of the phone wanting to go back to school? The head of the IT department for the Department of Defense for the United States of America. And I had just learned this whole questions thing. And I was nervous to ask him questions because I'm 26 and he's a lot older, and he legit was the head of the IT department for the Department of Defense. And he said he wanted to go back to school. So I started with, my opener was, so what makes you want to go back to school? And he answered me. And I did my digging, and I started to and I remember the feeling, like, do you ever get that sick to your stomach feeling like, I'm so uncomfortable right now, like, I don't want to do this? And my manager ran over because she could hear me, and she said, you're robbing him of self-discovery. Ask him one more question. Because she could tell I was about to just wrap up the conversation. So I got back on the phone, and I said, I know this might be obvious, but you've told me, he told me, I have the white picket fence. There's nowhere higher that I can go in my career. I'm at the top of my pay grade. Really, everything seems great. So I just said, you've told me all of this. And I just have to ask you one more question. Why do you really want to go back to school? And I remember hitting mute on my phone so I wouldn't keep talking out of nervousness. And he got real quiet. And then he said, I feel like I should be on one of those couches with a white washcloth on my forehead at the counselor's office. And he said, you know why I want to go back to school? I'm really insecure. And he said, I lead people with master's degrees, and I don't even have an associate's degree, and I don't need it. It won't help me make more money. I just want to feel more secure. That's it. That's all. Which really, first of all, my Jesus conversation wanted to come out. Jesus will make you secure. But the point of me telling you this story is he lived about 2 hours from where I was, and I could have helped him over the phone. He did not need to come meet me. So I started to say, okay, let me help you. We can do everything we need to do electronically over the phone. And he said, no. This was such a powerful, meaningful conversation for me that I'm going to take the day off work. My wife is going to take the day off work, and we really want to come take you out to lunch. And it was because of the third question. I could tell you story after story like that. So I'm just going to ask you to trust me for the sake of time, reading books about coaching and questions and really studying this and then actually doing it. It's the third question that really the truth comes out. And it's not that they're always holding back, but sometimes have you ever just not really thought much and then you talk to a friend and through their question asking, you have a self-discovery that you didn't even know was there? So often that's the case, is they don't even know that they're not telling you everything. It's because they haven't even thought about it that much. And your question will help them self-discover. Everybody tracking with me? All right. So then closed questions usually come at the end of this. So we've asked an opener. Then I've asked 3 digging questions. So far I'm 4 questions in. And then after you're done, usually you say something like, okay, I'm hearing you say, and then you're just going to recap it. So what I'm hearing you say is at school today, this, and this, that impacted you this way, right? Yes. And the value of that is it gives them a chance to say, no, you misunderstood me, or I missed something. Basically, it's a way of saying, did I miss anything, or do you have more to say, but in a more conversational kind of way, okay? Also, do you agree? Am I hearing you right? Will you make a change? Are you open to considering? And then it's very open because it's going to depend on your conversation, right? But are you open to considering going to counseling? Are you open to considering telling your friend that she hurt your feelings yesterday? You know, whatever it might be. But are you open to considering whatever it is that you think they should do? And this gives them a chance to make a decision. Yes, I am, or no, I'm not. Okay? All right. So I'd actually like to do this. And you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to give you all a word, and I'm just going to make you the collective question asker. So you all are one parent, the whole room. And I'm going to give you a word. And in the business world, when I teach this, because I teach it to people that are coaches or managers or like customer service or sales, I tell them to take notes. Obviously, that can't always work when you're in the car. But what I would recommend, I'm going to demonstrate how I would say to take notes. I really would encourage you, practice this. So it might be with your spouse, it might be with a good friend. Maybe, depending on your job, you could do this at work tomorrow, talking to someone on the phone. You could do this, they wouldn't even know. But doing what I'm about to show you is really simple. And I found after doing it about 3 months, I finally felt like I got questions down. But it was not like I took a class once and now I'm great. Okay? So I'm just going to give you guys the word pinecone. There is a reason for that. And when I'm talking to people, say that I'm on the phone and I say, so what makes you want to go back to school, or tell me about your day? Whatever they tell me, I just write down at the top of a blank piece of paper. And it's pretty easy when you're on the phone. I know this, you can't do this everywhere, right? But this is how I recommend you do it if you can. So I want you guys to just ask me a question, and you can go to the open digging questions page and just pull one out of there. Ask me a question about pinecone. And the trick is, you have to use the word pinecone because it's the word I said. Yes. So I'm like a person that I'm your teenager, and I just said the word pinecone. And by the way, the reason I picked a word that seems to have no meaning whatsoever is I want you to see you can use this no matter what they tell you. So it's intentional. That's why I picked a weird word. So just ask me a question off the open digging section, or use your own, but ask me an open-ended question, and it has to have the word pinecone in it. What does pinecone mean to you? So pause for a minute. When I first started learning this, I just started doing little arrows to signify how many questions have I asked. Because what you will find is when you're actually in the conversation, you will get lost in it, and it will be really hard to remember, have I asked 3 or have I asked 1? So I recommend doing this. So what was your question again? What does pinecone? Okay. I love to use them as fire starters for bonfires. And pause. One reason that I do this, if I'm talking to someone on the phone that's a client, it literally looks like this. And I don't write down every word they say, but I try to capture the meaningful ones so that I can use their exact word in my very next question. If I don't do this, I'm going to use a word that is a substitute, and I won't have as much rapport with them. Can you all see this? Okay. All right, ask me another question using fire starters or bonfires, you pick, but you just have to use something from here in your next question. How often do you do bonfires? Not nearly as much as I used to, but I usually, in normal life, will do maybe once a month. It's been a little while, probably about a year and a half since I've done that. So now we have 2 questions in. We need at least one more. What's that? See, this really is getting into a real conversation. My mom passed away 14 months ago, and I haven't had people over. And by the way, none of this was a setup. But do you see, we started with the word Pinecone. So those of you that thought I was crazy, what is she doing? Do you see it now? That was not discussed. But my mom passed away 14 months ago. And you know what's funny is I renovated the front of my house. I bought a new dining room table, and I was like, 2020 is going to be my year of community because I haven't been able to do that for a long time. I've been a caretaker, and I'm ready for community. And I literally bought a long table, and then COVID. But yeah, that's actually why. It's not even as much COVID. It's more I've been in recovery mode. And actually, you could keep going, right? And this is where you can stop or you can keep going. And that's where in a real conversation. What I find in real life as a coach, I'll get here, and usually it becomes 5, 6, 7, 8 questions, because usually the third thing is the real thing for us to talk about. So you can always ask more, but I find it helps, because when I learned this, I was kind of like, how do I know when I've asked enough? So if you can just know, ask an opener, which you guys didn't do. I just gave you a word. But maybe you would say, what do you want to talk about tonight? Pinecone. Okay. 3 digging questions, and I know that because there's 3 arrows. Make sense? Now, I realize this sounds a little bit prescribed, And if you're talking to your teenager in the car, it might not be exactly this. But here's where you really show that you are an active listener, is if you can then say, and this is part of why you write it down, you can then say, Anna, from what I understand, you love pine cones, and that's because you love to start bonfires with them, and you're not doing that as much right now because your mom passed. Is that right? And what I've observed when I'm talking to a coaching client or a business owner or someone in real estate, I've had people tell me, I don't know what it is about you. You're the only person I've been interested to talk to. You're the first person that I feel like understands me. And I know on my end, it was one, intentionally listening, because you can't do this if you're checking Facebook while you're on the phone, right? You can't do this if you're distracted by teenagers walking by that look like Spider-Man and Ghostbusters. By the way, I was in an intense conversation in the auditorium after church, and I looked up and Spider-Man was playing the piano, and I just started laughing. I was like, what is happening? What is happening right now? But can we all just agree, you can't do this if you are not actively listening. We can take a moment to just observe, because it's pretty great. Look at them. Look at that guy. Oh my goodness. It's like a popcorn machine. The stuffed animal thing. That's amazing. This is really incredible. Okay. Focus. I need to do this. But this is why, when you can actually use their words. So some of you, if you have jobs where you talk to people on the phone, or I don't know what all of you do, or even if you're just talking to a friend, to get good at this, I would recommend write down what people are saying and just be intentional. And you don't have to know this for long. Like I said, usually day 2 of class, people come in, and usually at least one person gets a little choked up about how it impacted their family, right? Any questions on this? Yes. Win friends and influence people. Yeah. Yes. So I'll repeat it for the recording. So is it from the book, How to Win Friends and Influence People? I've read that book, and I don't remember connecting that in my brain, but a lot of this comes from the culmination of books just I've read over the years. So yes, and also there's a book. I thought about, should I give you book names? I'm not a parent. I used to be a high school teacher, and I work with people all the time, but I don't have like parenting books to recommend to you, but I do have books about questions that I'll recommend. One is called Coactive Coaching, and it's all about how to work with people without telling them what to do, but helping them self-discover and guide them, which I absolutely think you could work with teenagers. So, and I don't want to discredit myself because I'm not a parent. I don't understand all the things you deal with, but I also was with teenagers 7 or 8 hours a day. So I've seen this kind of stuff work with them. So coactive coaching, there's another book I love called Good Leaders Ask Great Questions by John Maxwell. Good Leaders Ask Great Questions. And then would you like to know the very non-academic, non-spiritual way that I learned this? So I'm one of those like go all in kind of people. If there's something I'm interested in, I just go all in. Well, after hearing about open-ended questions, I thought it's just like when you start going to the gym and you start doing push-ups, your body hurts really bad, right? But then after you do it for a while, it gets easier. Well, it's like that in our brain. Like our brain's a muscle. And so the more that you do something, the easier it becomes. And so I thought I need to do this a lot so I can get really good at it quickly. So I would watch my normal TV shows that I loved, and I would write down, just as I watched the show, I would write down any closed question that I heard, and I would basically get a whole list of closed questions on this side of the page. And then when the show is over, I would transcribe them into open on this side. And I'll tell you, when it first started, it was really, really hard and took me a long time. And after a while, it became easy. To the point it was laughable. I remember asking a friend, what kind of breakfast sounds good to you today? And it's like early in the morning, and I thought, that is a deep breakfast question. And I felt like, yay, I finally know questions. But it does. It becomes that this will become the more automatic, but it absolutely takes intention. So reading books like that, writing down closed questions you hear, news reports, which I don't recommend you watch a ton of the news, but they purposely will ask closed questions because they have 2 minutes or 30 seconds. So they kind of want the yes or no. So you can listen to the news, or even just in the car, just listen and ask yourself, if I had to turn that into an open-ended question, how would I do it? And what I found is it took a while. Like sometimes I would sit there and think, I have no idea. And I'd have to think. Sometimes I would lean on Google. But eventually it got faster and easier. And now it's pretty simple. But it's been years now at this point. What other question? That was a great question. What other questions do you guys have before you practice? So how often do you ask questions versus making statements? It depends on the setting. So I absolutely believe, especially as kids are forming and developing, sometimes you just have to tell them. But here's a little trigger in my head. I'll usually ask 3 questions, and if I can tell that they're just not getting it, and I don't mean discovery questions, but like I'm asking them a question and they answer it weird, like I don't think they understood what I'm asking. I'll ask it again a different way. And then I still get the weird answer, like, we're doing this. They're not getting what then I will tell after 3. And I don't know a percentage. If it's like a coaching or trying to get into understanding their head or help them make a self-discovery, it's at least 90% or more questions. And it relieved me because I used to think to be a coach or just to help anybody, whether in ministry, the workforce, I have to know so much. And what I've actually learned is you just have to know how to ask questions, really. And there are some settings that you tell, like, right, I have not asked you guys very many questions because tonight I'm teaching. So in this setting, it's new information, so it's appropriate to share, right? So absolutely, there's times that you share and you tell because they're learning. But when they're processing and it's an emotional thing, or you're wanting them to self-discover, or what did you learn at Alive tonight, and how will that impact you, and what does that mean for your school life, and what does that mean for your friendship with Susan? Okay, tell me more about that. That is really the best place to ask questions. When they drop a little nugget and you realize that could become a learning thing, and it's easy to just tell, it takes a lot less time. But it's way more powerful for them if you ask. That's really good. What other questions? Y'all want to practice? Oh, yes, go ahead. Oh, actually, this is funny. When I first heard this, I was like, that is so weird. And I'm telling you, it works. If you did know, what would your answer be? Guys, it is so strange. You'll have some, I don't know. Okay, if you did know, what do you think the answer would be? And then they like spout off some amazing thing. And they don't notice. I was like, people will so notice I'm doing this. They don't. They just answer you. And I think you just have to use your judgment, right? Like, is it something they actually need to be taught, or are they just being, I don't know, I don't know, because you're my parent, and so I'm going to say I don't know just because. So you have to use your judgment. But if you did know, what would the answer be? It's really funny. Or sometimes you ask questions. I'll be honest, I'm having trouble thinking of a non-real estate example because that's the world I kind of live in. But if someone says, I have no idea what my house is worth, I might say, well, do you think it's worth like $50,000 or $1 million? And then they usually say, oh, no, probably like $350,000. And so I find it's not that people aren't trying to answer. It's just I have no idea. But when you give them a ridiculous range, how was your day at school? I don't know. What was it like? 0, horrible, just I want to go in bed and cry? Or was it like a 10 plus and can we please go out for ice cream and celebrate? Oh, I don't know. It's probably like a 7. You see what I'm saying? So sometimes when you get the I don't know, it's if you did know, what would the answer be? Or give them some crazy range of things depending on the topic. That won't always apply, and they'll usually pin it down. Yes? Oh, yeah. Yeah. Yes. So the question is, do they ever get like, why are you asking me all these questions, basically? I've told you enough. Honestly, the majority of the time, I find that they are refreshed to have someone that cares. Like, it's actually made me a little sad as doing this and learning it, because so often people will say, I feel like you care more about me than most other people because nobody else has asked me these questions. So yes, they will sometimes. And I look at that 2 ways. Either they've exhausted it. Like I might be asking 5 questions because I'm like, no, there's something else there. And I'm making it deeper in my head than it really is. And so sometimes when they're like, really, why are you asking me all these questions? Sometimes it's just, there's nothing more. We got it. And sometimes I just explain, well, I care about you. And so that's why I'm asking. And that sounds like such a simple response, but I find people usually respond to that pretty well. I don't have to ask you these questions, but I want to because I care. That's why. And that usually, and none of this isn't always, right? But I look at it like if I can increase my quality conversations to be more often, and I'll still have some that don't go well, I'll take them more often, right? Like we're not looking for perfect conversations. We're just looking to increase. If I have one better conversation per week, that's huge for that relationship, right? Yes. Oh, that's a great question. I'm going to have to really think about that. I would actually say Ross Robinson. I hired him as a strengths coach for a while. Most of the time, it's coaches that I paid to ask me questions. It's not a common skill. My mom asked me great questions. Yeah, she was a teacher. She was a high school teacher as well, and she asked me really great questions. That's who comes to mind. I'll have to think about. And this is the other thing with questions. I'll probably drive home from here and think of like, oh, why did I not say these 3 people? So know that with your questions is they may not have an answer for you in the moment, but remember that quote at the beginning, questions prick the conscience. Part of what that means is I think about it later. So I'll probably have an answer for you in about 20 minutes. That's who comes to mind right away. Okay, let's practice. And here's what we're going to do. I was trying to figure out how to do this because most of you know each other pretty well because you're here with your spouse or someone you know. There's several people that are not here. You're here not paired up. So what I'm thinking, usually I have a get to know you question, but this is a different audience. So here's what I'm thinking. Pick a topic and get with the person. I think there's 4 people that are here. So that makes it great to pair up. Just find someone who's sitting by themselves and pair up. And some ideas for you. You could start with a hobby question, a book, like tell me about your favorite book. That could be a good opener. Or describe your favorite place you've ever traveled. I mean, it could be anything. Those are just some ideas for you. And all I really want you to do is practice this. And if you have a pen, I really would ask you to write this down. Let's maximize the time to do this. So get with a partner and basically pick a topic. And their first answer, write it down. And then ask an open-ended question, write it down. Ask an open-ended question, write it down until you have at least 3 arrows. Does this make sense to everybody? And it can feel a little uncomfortable, so let me tell you what not to do. Okay, you have 2 minutes, and then the first minute and a half is, oh, where are you from? How long have you been going to this church? Me too. And then we don't have time to practice because you're nervous. Just practice. It'll help you. And I'm going to time it at 2 minutes for one person to be a question asker. So it's basically one person's the answerer, one person is the question asker for a full 2 minutes, okay? Then I'll stop you, and I'll say, what questions do you have now that you've done it? And then I'll have you switch. Does that make sense? All right, so go ahead and find a partner. That might mean getting up and walking around or moving. And I'm going to give you 2 minutes to ask questions. Yeah, if you want to switch it up, like if you don't want to ask questions of the person you came with, I actually think that's even better. I should want to tell you to. Yeah, go find someone else. I don't care who you ask, just ask somebody questions. So it could be the person beside you or somebody you don't know. I'll give it a little extra time so y'all can get settled. Oh, and feel free to cheat off the sheet. Do you need a partner? I think. Okay. If we need to have a group of 3, that's fine. Yeah, that's totally fine. Okay, we're right at our time, and you're going to have more time in just a second. I know some of you are mid-conversation. I'm going to have you switch before you do. What questions popped up? So usually feedback I get in class is it looked easy, and then we went to do it, and it was way harder than we thought. So before I have you guys switch, what questions do you have, if any? Everything's good? Okay. So if you want to wrap up what you were doing, that's fine, but quickly switch so that the other person is the question asker. And again, good topics could be hobbies, travel, what books, why did you pick North Hills? It could be anything. And actually, I'll give a little extra time for the group of 3. So go for about another 2 minutes. Okay, we're at about 2 minutes. Go ahead and wrap up. And I was listening. There were some good conversations going on. Okay. So the point of this, obviously, you could probably talk for way longer. Some of you are feeling very interrupted at the moment. Yet can you see, and I really would like your feedback, were you able to experience the result of asking open-ended questions? Like, did any of you, it's new, give me some feedback as to what your experience was like, whether it be a question or something that was an aha moment, you could say. Yeah. Yes. Yeah, genuine conversation as the person answering or the person asking? Or both? Both? Yeah. I remember feeling empowered. Like, I now know how to have a conversation. Like, I always wanted to have genuine conversations, and it was almost like, how? And it was very empowering, actually, to learn this. I totally agree with you. There was somebody over here. It's a little hard to see because the lights... Oh. Yeah. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. So you guys noticed what I noticed. What I taught you guys tonight, by the way, came from my failures. So the whole 3 questions, digging versus open, and then I would record my calls and listen back to see, like, I think I know how I sounded, but how did I really sound? And that's where this came from, was I thought that I asked lots of questions, and I asked one question, and then they talked a lot, and I didn't ask anymore. But I perceived I asked a lot of questions because they just kept talking. Or I'm not using their words, kind of like you were saying, like I was jumping topic. That's why this came into existence, was I'm jumping topic so much. So that's why that's there, it's hard. It is really hard. And I'm not joking. It took about 3 months of very faithful practice to feel like I was really starting to get a handle, and probably about 6 months to where it started to feel automatic. And not like practicing constantly, but I would record questions and listen to them driving to work. And I'm a music girl. Like put the truck windows down and the music up. I am happy, even if I have to turn the heat on. And driving to work, it was obnoxious because it's like I'm listening to questions on my way to work, but I just looked at it like this is temporary for long-term gain. So there are things you can do to really amp it up, but just know it will take a while and it will feel like you're writing with your non-dominant hand. And that's normal. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. That's exactly what it should feel like. So funneling, like we started kind of big and broad and then we got it pinpointed. Yeah. By the way, it's very normal to ask a question. Hold on a second. And someone will respond with more than one answer. That's totally normal. In fact, it probably just happened to you, some of you. So tell me about your favorite books. Oh, I can't decide. I love, Every Good Endeavor and some other thing. So what I've learned is answer number 1 goes here. And literally on the page, when talking to someone, draw a line. Answer number 2 over here. Okay, what about Every Good Endeavor do you really love? Answer. Okay, so you told me you love Every Good Endeavor because, and then you recap it. Is that right? Yep. You also told me you really love Good Leaders Ask Great Questions. And what do you think happens to the person that was talking to you when you do that? Yeah. Well, yeah, it can help them self-discover which one they like better. It's common. Whoa, I forgot I said that. So remember we said questions help with rapport? This is really, if I was queen of the world, I would make this just normal. Like everybody takes notes like this when you talk to people. I know you wouldn't actually do that, but really, like I do not know how you can do this well without writing notes. So when you're on the phone, I love to it helps you focus too. Like you can't be distracted when you're doing this. But it's because if I don't, I will forget that they said something else, right? And in conflict, I actually find that this helps conflict a lot because someone might say, I'm upset about Sally, and John. Well, what's going on with Sally? And you ask about that, and then you forget, and they forget because you got distracted talking about Sally to go back and talk about John. Does that make sense? And so then they go to bed and they're still like anxious and unresolved, and maybe they can't remember why because I talked, but it's like you can forget the second thing they said if you don't write it down. So I find often if someone is at a tension point, if I don't address both things, we usually don't get onto the same page. Or I'll feel like we talked about it and solved it and things still seem weird and I can't figure out why. Oh, there's a whole thing we forgot to go back and address. So does that make sense to everybody? Again, this is a huge crash course. This is usually 2 days, so I'm nervous I'm going too fast. But yeah, if they give you more than one answer and you are able to write it down, basically make like columns. If they give you 3 things, 1, 2, 3, and you basically work your way down. Okay, you also said, and then you work your way down. Okay, you also mentioned, and now you've just had an amazing conversation. Okay, what other questions do you guys have? Or just a takeaway? I thought she raised her hand. Yes, adorable person in the back. Was this helpful? Good. I'll be honest, when Tim asked me, I got real nervous because I was like, oh my gosh, I've been praying for this and now I'm freaked out. So I'm glad. I wasn't sure how it would work in a short period of time. Yes. Yes. I mean, I'm a huge fan of just praying, especially if it's a deeper conversation, like, Lord, just give me wisdom on what to ask about here. What I've learned, so I taught high school English, and a lot of you will remember an English class. Remember when your teacher was like, underline the subject and circle the verb? So I like to have this in my head when I'm talking to people of, just like in English class, which one's the subject, which one's the verb? When asking a question, think, which one's the emotionally charged word? That's usually the one to ask about. So if you say, tell me about your day at school, well, I don't know because it's been so long for me. But, math class was great. And then we had soccer practice and that was great. And then I had a little bit of a issue with, so-and-so. That would be the thing to ask about. You could ask about all three of those. Tell me more about math class. Tell me more about, but those things don't seem that significant. But when they brought up the emotional words, that's what I would recommend you dig on. And also sometimes you have to get permission. And now I'm talking more beyond just your kids, but like I have found as a coach, I can say just about anything to anyone or ask really personal things to cause transformation if I get permission. So do you mind if I ask you a question? And if I get a yes, I have found I can do or say just about anything. So getting permission goes a long way with question asking. And this, by the way, we're pointing this towards kids right now, but really, this can be used in any human relationship whatsoever. Does that help? Yeah. Did you have a question? Okay. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. What's the relationship context? Oh, like a coworker? Yeah, I find what are common questions are just like, how was your weekend or what'd you do this weekend? And I find even just changing it, and these are some key words you can write down, but describe for me is a great opener. So describe for me, tell me. Or you could ask them a isolating question, like, what was the best part of your weekend? Oh, man, when we went to Brewster's Ice Cream. Oh, what about going to Brewster's Ice Cream made it so great? So, and that's why I did Pinecone with you. I know some of you were like, we don't know this person, and what is she doing? It was intentional because I wanted you to see you could really take anything someone says to you and get a conversation. But those are some things you could do. So describe for me the highlight of your weekend. Tell me what was the best part. What was the most challenging part? What energized you about the weekend? In the context of work, if someone's talking about work, you could say, what motivated you as you were doing that project? Like if you can see someone's energy is high, wow, what got you so excited as you worked on that thing? That'll give you some clues. My Strengths Finder coach hat is coming out right now, but yeah, that will give you clues. But you really can have fantastic conversations off things that start off seeming so small. Just in there, and I'm not doing this to say I'm the example, but it just happened to me tonight. I met a new girl at church tonight, and we got to talking about chopping down Christmas trees. I don't know how this happened. But anyway, we got into this big conversation, and we both ended up in tears, but it all came from open-ended questions about, like, she asked me, I think, she said, what do you think about Christmas? And I said, usually I love it, and this year it's hard because my mom's gone. And then I started asking her questions, and we both sat there up until I had to walk in here, and we were in tears, and it was open-ended questions. But it started with Christmas trees. So don't feel like it has to be this. I mean, it can be anything. What do you love about Christmas trees? Yes. Yeah. 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 Taking initiative. And that is challenging sometimes, depending on people's wiring. We want others to take the initiative too sometimes. I will also say, though, I found that as getting more into questions, a really nice surprise was that as I asked questions, frequently people would start to ask them back. What was the highlight of your weekend? And then you talk about it for 5 minutes. Well, what was the highlight of your weekend? So it didn't, it just, that can help. But yeah, it is hard when you're the constant initiator. And oh my gosh, now I know what y'all are laughing at. There's a chicken walking up. This is so distracting. Focus. I will say to that end, though, just recently, I'm just going to get personal for a minute, if that's fine. But I feel like a lot of community has just gone away this year, in large part because COVID, but like my life group meeting, mom's gone, a bunch of friends moved away. And about 2 weeks ago, I just started praying because I felt similarly, like I feel like I'm the initiator, or I don't know, like I don't always feel like putting in all the effort. So I just started praying, God, would you just send some friends my way? And literally, that girl tonight, we were crying about Christmas trees, and we set a date to get together. And so I do think, too, like praying, God, would you put some initiators in my life, or would you put this in my life? I think he delights in that. So just a little encouragement. What else? And by the way, I'm done technically teaching, so let's do this. Let's put my info up there, and I'm only doing that if you have further questions. My goal and desire truly is to be of service. Right before I moved to South Carolina, I was really involved in the youth ministry at my church and music and all the stuff. And I moved here, found North Hills, and was about to jump in. And then my mom was diagnosed with cancer, and that was 12 years ago. And so my life's been really consumed with that for 12 years. And now I feel like I have the time again, as I've just been praying, like, God, how do you want me to use me? How do you want me to serve? Like, I have a passion for this, but I don't quite know where to put it. So when I say, like, here's my contact info, reach out if I can help in some way, I feel like I'm learning as I go, and I'm happy to be a resource. As a former teacher / coach / I'm passionate about questions. So really, I'm happy to help in any way I can. And then I'll just so you know, too, I'm pouring into the leaders. So I just did this with the Alive leaders. So the leaders that are leading your kids had this training, and we're going to keep doing it. So I'm going to meet with the leaders once a month to continue training. So they're going to get it from, they're probably like, what is going on? What kind of water are they drinking in North Hills? What's up with the questions? We're going to get it. All right, what other questions? And if you got to go, that's fine. But it seems like you guys have some great questions, so I'm going to stick around. What other questions or takeaways do you guys have? Going once. Perfect. I just encourage you to use this everywhere you go. I'm going to give you a secret. So when feeling stuck, and I remember that, especially being new, and it happens even now, because sometimes you're in a conversation and it gets awkward, or like, I don't know how to word a question off that, or I don't know what to do. The best thing you can do is just tell me more about that. Tell me more about that. And even better, if you can put their word in there. So if they just said ice cream, tell me more about ice cream. I had a friend that interviewed someone, and it was like a 2-hour interview. It was really long. And she was like, I only asked him one question. I was like, one question? She's like, yeah, I just was kind of bored of interviewing people, so I just made a game with myself. The only thing I asked him the whole interview was tell me more about, but then I'd put his word in there. And at the end of the interview, she said to the guy, did you notice I only asked you one question? Because she was wanting to see, like, did he pick up on the fact that all I said the whole day was tell me more, tell me more, tell me more, tell me more. And he's like, no, you didn't. You asked me tons of questions. She's like, all I said was tell me more about, and then plug in whatever he just said. And he did not notice, which shocked me, actually. I think some people would notice, but that also kind of encouraged me, like, okay, I'm not an expert on this yet. I can just say, tell me more about blank, and really make a lot of headway with people. Cool. Well, if you guys have nothing else, we'll go ahead and wrap up. Would someone like to pray? I'd like to just pray that we'll use what we learned tonight and that you'll see an impact. So I can pray unless one of you would like to pray. Anybody? Perfect. Thank you. Amen. Thanks for coming, guys. Oh, and there's a paper over there that Tim, he said you guys would know about it. It looks like this, if you would grab it from, and there's snacks and drinks over on that table. Here you go. All right, thanks, guys. You're welcome.